my name is Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel Bandy's Books, and today we are here to talk November reading plans. I've got a great TBR for you this month, and I have Luna with me. She is here to say hello, and then shortly she'll go lay in her bed. If you're new to this channel and you hear some snorts and snuffles in the background, that is because of this little girl right here. Those are just her noises that she makes, and our apartment's very small, so there's just only so far she can get away from the microphone. So November TBRs, gosh, I can't believe that it is already November. I don't know where 2024 has gone. Honestly, this whole year just seems like a complete blur. So much has happened in 2024. I feel like this has been a really transitional year for me. A lot in my life has changed this particular year. So we're gonna finish 2024 off strong. November is a great reading month. There are so many awesome readathons happening. It's hard to honestly pick which ones I'm going to participate in, but there are a handful that I look forward to every single year. So let's talk about that first, and then I'll tell you specifically what I'm reading for all of the different readathons. So first and foremost, in November, I always read books for Indigenous Peoples Month. Now, I always give this disclaimer. That's not saying that I don't read books by Indigenous authors throughout the entire year. I believe in reading diversely all year long, and that is a big focus for this channel. However, when there is a celebratory month, I really like to highlight authors from that particular background. And so my entire TBR this month is books by Indigenous authors. And then the three readathons that I will be participating in are Netgalley November, which focuses on clearing out some of your requests on Netgalley. Mine is a little out of control right now, so I really need that. So I have quite a few Netgalley ARCs on my list this month. And there's also Nonfiction November, which I absolutely love. It always encourages me to read a little more nonfiction than I do usually. This year I've been doing really good with nonfiction. I read a couple rounds for the BookTube prize in the nonfiction genre, so I feel like I'm way ahead of my typical nonfiction selections, but I have some really great ones picked out for this month for this readathon. And finally, Historathon. And Historathon is a readathon focused on historical fiction. This is another one that I really enjoy. I do read a lot of historical fiction throughout the year, but I have a handful picked out specifically for this readathon this month. So we have a focus on Indigenous authors across all three of those readathons, and then we'll be focusing on ARCs from Netgalley, nonfiction books, and historical fiction books. I'm so excited about this. If you're interested in any of the readathons that I have just mentioned, I will make sure there are links in the description to this video, both to any announcement videos that I can find and the creators who host those readathons. All of them are fantastic, and you should definitely check them out. So let's get started with my Netgalley picks. I have a good handful of books for Netgalley November. I have broken them up into fiction and nonfiction, just so we know which ones are going to count towards my nonfiction November reading. So my first selection for Netgalley November is Where Wolves Don't Die by Dr. Anton Treuer. Dr. Treuer is a member of the Ojibwe tribe and is also a professor of Ojibwe and Native American studies. Ezra hates living in Minneapolis. He misses his First Nation reservation. Ezra gets into a terrible fight defending his friend Nora, and later that evening, his assailant's house gets burned down. Knowing that he won't get a fair trial, his family sends him away to clear trap lines with his grandfather in the wilderness, but people are hunting him. Next up, I have Fire Exit by Morgan Talty, and he is from the Penobscot Indian Nation in Maine. Charles Lamosway is haunted by his past. He struggles to keep up with his home, his mother who's slipping deeper into dementia, and his big-hearted but alcoholic friend Bobby. Memories of his lost childhood on the reservation, a love affair cut short, and the tragic hunting accident that resulted in his stepfather's death follow him wherever he goes. Underneath it all, he struggles with the knowledge that he has a secret child and whether or not to divulge the truth. So both of these selections are books that I'm really excited about. When I saw them come up for review on Netgalley, I definitely clicked on them right away. Morgan Talty is an author in particular that I've been meaning to read for a long time. Continuing on with my Netgalley selections, we're going to move from fiction into nonfiction. So these books will count for both Nonfiction November and Netgalley November. First up, we have The Indian Card by Scheuttpelz. She is from the Lumbee tribe in North Carolina. This book is billed as a groundbreaking exploration of Native American identity, tribal enrollment, and what this reveals about our understanding of race and politics. When I came across this on Netgalley, I was super interested. I don't know very much about like the tribal enrollment process and tribal politics. This is an area where I would like to know more, and so I feel like this is going to be a really informative book for me. I'm really looking forward to learning a bit more about this subject. Then I have We Will Be Jaguars by Nemonte Nenquimo. Nenquimo is from the Waorani tribe in Amazonas, Ecuador. This is an impassioned memoir about an indigenous childhood, a clash of cultures, and a fight to save the Amazon rainforest and protect her people. This book sounds so good, and the cover of this book is really striking as well. I came across this in my scroll through books coming out on Netgalley, and I was immediately captivated by the front cover. Then when I read what this was about, I was even more intrigued. I spent quite a bit of time in Ecuador. I think in total I spent almost 4 months in Ecuador, and it is one of my favorite countries in the world. I haven't actually been to the Amazon region through Ecuador yet. When I went to the Amazons, I went through Peru, but I'm really interested to learn more about the Guarani tribe, about the Amazon in Ecuador in particular, and to revisit a country that I love so much. And my final nonfiction Netgalley selection is Thundersong by Sasha LaPointe. They are from the Upper Skagit and Nooksack Indian tribe in the Pacific Northwest. Drawing on a rich family archive, as well as the anthropological work of her late great-grandmother, Sasha LaPointe explores themes ranging from Native American identity and stereotypes to cultural displacement and environmental degradation. This is another book, when I was scrolling and I saw it, I was immediately interested. This sounds like it's right up my alley. I actually saw one review of this on BookTube so far. I want to say it was from Belinda at A Web of Stories, and I think that I remember she really enjoyed this. And so I'm really excited about getting into it as well. So from there, we're going to continue on with the nonfiction, but none of the books that I mentioned from here on out are from Netgalley. They are either on my physical TBR or they are on my Libby requests. So first up, I have An Indian Among Los Indigenas. This is a native travel memoir by Ursula Pike. Ursula Pike is from the Karuk tribe in California. So this book is about Ursula's experience traveling through Bolivia, and she has a particularly unique lens because she is an Indigenous woman from the United States, and the memoir focuses a lot on the Indigenous women of Bolivia and her perspective and her experiences being there. I have spent a good amount of time in Bolivia as well, 3 weeks. It's a country that I dearly, dearly love, and Indigenous culture is so prominent in Bolivia. I'm really excited to read Ursula's reflections and her perspective being Indigenous herself, but from a completely different culture. I think this is going to be fascinating. I also really love that the inside cover is this gorgeous picture of Bolivia. This really seems to capture it well, the snow-capped mountains and the fields with the alpacas. After that, I'm going to be reading Whiskey Tender by Deborah Jackson Taffa. She is from two tribes, the Quechuan Nation and the Laguna Pueblo. Growing up as a citizen of both the Quechuan Nation and the Laguna Pueblo in the 1970s and 80s, Taffa, now the director of the MFA in Creative Writing at the Institute of American Indian Arts, was encouraged to assimilate into white American culture. Her memoir reckons with the false promise of the American dream. So this is a book that came across my radar on my trip across the Southwest earlier this year. My mom and I were in a bookstore in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they had an entire shelf of books by local authors. And this was one of the books that they were displaying. And I think my mom picked up a copy, if I remember correctly, but this memoir has been on my radar since. Then I have The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee by David Treuer, and he is Ojibwe. This is a sweeping history, a counter-narrative in fact, of Native American life from Wounded Knee all the way to present day. I have been meaning to read this book for a couple years. It's one that I have put on my TBR, but it always seems to have a super long wait, and I just don't coordinate right, and when it pops up, I'm not where I need to be to read it. So this year I planned a little bit better, and I was able to get a copy of this in advance, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I know some of the highlights of Native American history, but I'm sure that my perspective is skewed by the fact that I'm learning it in American schools. And so I'm really interested to get a more complete picture of Native American history and really update and get more accurate information. I've heard that this is a really fantastic starting point for this. So next up, we're going to be talking about fiction. I'm going to start off first with my historical fiction selections for Historathon, and then from there we'll go into all the other genres. First up, I have Council of Dolls by Mona Susan Power. She is a member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. So this book says that it spans 3 generations of Dakota women from the 19th century to the present day. From the mid-century metropolis of Chicago to the windswept lands of the Dakota people to the brutal Indian boarding schools, A Council of Dolls is the tale of 3 extraordinary women, told in part through the stories of the dolls that they carry. We have Sissy, born in 1961, Lillian, born in 1925, and Cora, born in 1888. This has been popping up a lot recently, and I know my mom's read it. I think that she enjoyed it. I found a copy of this on a trip my mom and I recently took to Pasadena. I haven't posted the video yet, but we did a whole road trip around Pasadena and Los Angeles to a bunch of bookstores. And this was one of the books that I found. I found it in the last bookshop down in downtown LA. And I was so excited because I've been wanting to check this out. I also really love the cover of this book. I think the cover design is just stunning. So this is one of my historical fiction picks for the month. Then I have All I See Is Violence by Angie Elita Newell. She is from the Lidlikue First Nation. A woman warrior, a ruthless general, and a single mother. These are 3 stories deftly braided into the legacy of a stolen nation. This is a book that came across my radar because of Netgalley as well. I was scrolling through Netgalley and I saw this just stunningly striking cover, and I looked it up, I requested it. I didn't unfortunately get the copy that I requested, but it's been on my radar ever since. It's been a book I've been wanting to get to. So I've been finally able to get my hands on a copy, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I love these multi-generational stories. This one sounds really interesting. The 3 different women are such different characters. I can't wait to see how this all comes together. Next up, we have A Grandmother Begins the Story by Michelle Porter, and she is Métis. 5 generations of Métis women tell their stories in an attempt to bring healing to their family and to the land itself. So this is a book that came onto my radar because of my Book of the Month predictions. It was one that I predicted for Book of the Month, I want to say last year sometime, and a book that I was really excited to pick up. Unfortunately, my library hasn't had a copy of it until recently, and so I was very excited to see that I was able to get my hands on it for this month. I'm really looking forward to jumping into it. It's a book that I haven't heard a lot about, but it sounds excellent. Then we have Woman of Light by Callie Fajardo Anstine. She is of a mixed background, so she is Chicana, Filipina, and of Pueblo descent. This is a dazzling epic of betrayal, love, and fate that spans 5 generations of an indigenous Chicano family in the American West. So this is one of those other covers that's just strikingly gorgeous. This was a feature by Book of the Month, I want to say a couple years back. I know my mom's read it. I think that she enjoyed this book as well, and we usually have a very similar taste. So I'm expecting to love this book. In particular, I'm really excited about the perspective of the crossover between Chicano and indigenous culture. And my final historical fiction selection is Where the Dead Sit Talking by Brandon Hobson. Hobson is from the Cherokee Nation. With his single mother in jail, Sequoia, a 15-year-old Cherokee boy is placed in foster care. Literally and figuratively scarred by his mother's years of substance abuse, Sequoia mostly keeps to himself, living with his emotions pressed deep down below the surface, at least until he meets 17-year-old Rosemary. She's a troubled artist who lives with the family as well. Sequoia and Rosemary bond over their shared Native American identity and their tumultuous path through the foster care system. But as Sequoia's feelings towards Rosemary deepen, the precariousness of their lives and their scars threaten to undo them both. So this is a book that actually really wasn't on my radar prior to this month. In getting my TBR together, I have a physical copy of one of Brandon Hobson's other books on my TBR, and I was doing a little bit of research and looking into some stuff, and I saw that this was one of his first novels, and it sounded really interesting to me, so I added it onto the TBR. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. My last historical fiction selection is Plague of Doves by Louise Erdrich, and she is of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa tribe. Erdrich is probably one of the most famous Native American authors. She has just a wealth of books published. Erdrich is kind of a hit and miss author for me. I've tried her book, The Night Watchman, and I didn't love it, but I did really enjoy her more recent publication, The Sentence. So I'm hoping that The Plague of Doves will be one that works for me as well. So this is about the unsolved murder of a farm family that still haunts the small white town of Pluto, North Dakota, generations after the vengeance exacted and the distortions of fact transformed the lives of Ojibwe living on the nearby reservation. This definitely sounds historically accurate and like it's going to be a heartbreaking novel. This was a Pulitzer Prize finalist as well, and hopefully this will work for me. So we've covered all of the books that I have specifically for readathons. We've covered Netgalley November, Nonfiction November, and Historathon. So now I have a handful of fiction books across a variety of different genres that I would like to get to this month, and so I'm gonna go ahead and talk about those. First up, I have a rare poetry selection, and this is called Poukahangatus by Tayi Tibble. She is Maori from New Zealand. In this book, an acclaimed young poet explores her identity as a 21st century Indigenous woman. I came across this book in doing my research for my TBR, but this book sounded really interesting to me. I love this exploration of culture in this particular time period and what this woman's identity means to her. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I'm hoping that it's going to be a really good read. So let's go ahead and get into some fiction selections now. First up, I have To Shape a Dragon's Breath Death by Moniquill Blackgoose. Blackgoose is from the Seekonk Wampanoag tribe. This book came onto my radar during my trip to Pasadena and Los Angeles recently. So we went to Glendale, California to check out the Lost Bookshop. And while we were there, they mentioned that like a block away, there was another bookshop that focused specifically on like fantasy, science fiction, and horror. And so we stopped over there, and the person that was working in that bookshop had some really fantastic recommendations. This is one of the recommendations that they gave me. I was so excited about this recommendation. I love a good fantasy series. So this says it is about a young Indigenous woman who enters a colonizer-run dragon academy and quickly finds herself at odds with the approved way of doing things. This is the first book in this particular series, and I'm hoping that I enjoy it because I love a good long fantasy series. After that, I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones, who is from the Blackfeet tribe. Graham Jones is another really popular Indigenous author. He's pretty well known here in the States. He specializes in horror and thrillers. I have read a handful of his books prior, and I actually really have enjoyed what I've read so far. I've read The Only Good Indians and My Heart is a Chainsaw. And when I saw that Aardvark featured I Was a Teenage Slasher, I was so excited. I'm not super into like slasher horror movies, so this might be a book that's not for me, but I'm still gonna give it a try because I really enjoy his writing style. This book is set in La Mesa, Texas in July 1989. It's the summer before senior year for best friends Talty Driver and Amber Dennison. They're not in the marching band, they're not in the FFA, they don't really count. Amber's the only native student in town, and Talty is only on the radar due to his father's recent death. This is all about to change. Bodies are going to be dropping fast in this small West Texas town. For a few unbearably hot days that will resonate through the decades and even get made into a TV movie, Talty and Amber will be famous, notorious. Finally, everyone will know their names. This sounds really promising. I'm super excited to get into this. After that, I have VenCo by Cherie Dimaline. Dimaline is from the Georgian Bay Historic Métis community. Métis millennial Lucky St. James is bored. She lives with her cantankerous grandmother Stella in a teeny Toronto apartment and has been waiting for something to happen, something different, something more. Then one night, a strange and irresistible impulse seizes Lucky. She burrows into an old passageway and finds a tarnished silver spoon, humming with otherworldly energy, etched with a long-nosed witch and the word sailor. Lucky has no idea that the spoon connects her into a teeming network of witches who have anxiously awaited her discovery. I've heard pretty good reviews about this. I want to say this came out last year and was pretty hyped up, so I'm really looking forward to getting into it. I love the witchy vibes, and I'm curious to see how this is going to connect to Sailor. From there, I have a short story collection called Every Drop is a Man's Nightmare by Megan Kamale Kakimoto. Kakimoto is Kanaka Maoli, or native Hawaiian. Megan Kamale Kakimoto's Hawaii is a place where unruly sexuality and generational memory overflow the postcard image of paradise and the boundaries of the real, where the superstitions born of the island take on the weight of truth. So this is a book that I found earlier this year at Buffy's Book Boutique. You can check out my video up here. I had never heard of this book before. I was just scanning their bookshelves and came across this one. The cover really drew me in, and I have been reading some fantastic short story collections this year. Like honestly, some of my best of the entire year have been short story collections. And so I thought I would give this one a try and see if I couldn't add to all of the other fantastic short story collections I've read. Then earlier in this video, I mentioned that I have a second book by Brandon Hobson. That is The Remove. This is a book that's been on my TBR for a little bit, and I'm excited to finally try to get to it this month. So this says, in the 15 years since their teenage son Ray was killed in a police shooting, the Achota family has been suspended in private grief. Their mother Maria is increasingly struggles to manage the onset of Alzheimer's and her husband Ernest. Their adult daughter Sonia leads a life of solitude punctuated only by spells of dizzying romantic obsession. And their remaining son Edgar fled home long ago, turning to drugs to mute his feelings of alienation. I love a book that reflects on like family dynamics and how everybody is dealing with their emotions and the impact of the things that have happened to them. I haven't heard a ton of reviews of this book, but it sounds promising. And my final book on my physical TBR is The Ghost Dancers by Adrienne C. Lewis. This is a book that I found here in Las Vegas at a local bookshop, and Adrienne C. Lewis is a member of the Lovelock Paiute tribe, and they are native to Nevada. This says, it's 1988, and Lynn Bean Wilson, a Nevada Indian and middle-aged professor of journalism at Lakota University in South Dakota, is reassessing his life. Although Bean is the great-grandson of Wovoka, the Paiute leader who initiated the ghost dance religion, he is not a full-blood Indian, and he endures the scorn of the Pine Ridge Sioux, whose definition of Indian identity is much narrower. A man with many flaws, Bean wrestles with his own worst urges, his usually ineffectual efforts to help his family, and his determination to establish his identity as an Indian. I haven't heard anything about this book, and when I've looked up reviews, there's a handful of them, but not many. This is an author I'm not familiar with, but they have published a ton of works. Unfortunately, this author has since passed away. and I believe this was like the last thing that he published before he passed. I am looking forward to getting into this and learning a bit about the ghost dancing religion and the history of indigenous tribes here in Nevada. And then I have a handful of books that I'm checking out through my local library. First up is A Minor Chorus by Billy Ray Belcourt. Belcourt is from the Driftpile Cree Nation. The unnamed narrator in this book chronicles a series of encounters. A heart-to-heart with fellow doctoral student River over the mounting pressure placed on marginalized students, a meeting with Michael, a closeted adult from his hometown, whose vulnerability and loneliness punctuate the realities of queer life on the fringe. So Belcourt has been on my radar for a bit, but I have yet to have read any of his work. This in particular sounds really interesting. I think this is like a collection of stories, and I love the exploration of deep themes. This sounds like it's going to be right up my alley. I'm looking forward to getting into this. Then I have Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wapkishi Grice. They're from the Wasaugasing First Nation in Ontario. With winter looming, a small Anishinaabe community goes dark. Cut off, people become passive and confused. Panic builds as the food supply dwindles, while the band council and a pocket of the community struggle to maintain order. They're escaping the crumbling community to the south, and soon after, others began to follow. This is a dystopian fiction, and I'm really excited. This has kind of creepy vibes going on. There's a lot that I really love about this book. It is something that I see recommended very frequently, and I'm really hoping that I enjoy. Next up, I have a bit of a surprise. I have a romance novel on my TBR. If you've been following my channel for a while, then you will know that I very rarely ever read romance. In fact, I have a deal with myself that out of the 260 or so books that I read every year, I have to read at least one romance. Give one romance novel a try, and I've already done that this year. I read a book back in February by Kennedy Ryan, which I actually enjoyed, but in an effort to not only read books about trauma and pain, I wanted to include at least one romance novel on my TBR this month. And there is a particular romance novel that just came out that caught my eye, and I was able to get a copy of it. That's The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava. Nava is from the Chickasaw tribe. Ember, who like the author is Chickasaw, fudges her qualifications and her ethnic background to land a corporate job in Oklahoma. When she falls for IT tech Nanuoa, who is also native, and they begin to date, which is against policy, she gets caught up in more lies. This book kind of caught my attention because it sounds a little bit more complex than the typical romance. We have this character who's really struggling with her identity and her place in Oklahoma. I am actually feeling pretty optimistic about getting into this. Hopefully this will be the second romance book that I read this year that I really enjoy. Then I have Where They Last Saw Her by Marcy R. Rendon. She is from the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. Poole has lived on the Red Pine Reservation in Minnesota her whole life. As she trains for the Boston Marathon early one morning, she hears a scream coming from the woods. When she returns to search the area, all she finds are tire tracks and a single beaded earring. When she hears that a second woman has been stolen, she is determined to do something about it. In her quest to find justice for all the women on the reservation, she is confronted with the hard truths of their home and the people who are purported to serve them. So this book came onto my radar because of my Book of the Month prediction videos. A couple months ago, I predicted this for one of Book of the Month selections, and unfortunately they didn't pick it up, but I still say that this would have been an excellent pick. I really enjoy a good thriller, but unfortunately I don't find there are a lot of good thrillers. This one sounds like it's going to be excellent. I'm really excited to get into it, and I'm hoping it's just going to keep me on the edge of my seat. Then we have The Seedkeeper by Diane Wilson. Wilson is from the Dakota tribe. This is a haunting novel spanning several generations. The Seedkeeper follows a Dakota's family struggle to preserve their way of life and their sacrifices to protect what matters the most. So this is another one of those books where I saw the cover of this book and was immediately drawn in, and then I read the description and was like, oh, this sounds so good. I don't know a lot about this author or this particular read, but I'm very excited to check it out. Then we have Probably Ruby by Lisa Bird Wilson. Bird Wilson is Métis and Nahia from Saskatchewan, Canada. This is the story of a woman in search of herself in every sense of the word. When we first meet Ruby, a Métis woman in her 30s, her life is spinning out of control. She's angling to sleep with her counselor while she's also trying to rekindle an old relationship that she knows will only bring her heartache. But as we soon learn, Ruby's story is far more complex than even she can imagine. This is a book that came onto my radar during my research for my TBR this month. This is not a book that I was familiar with, but as soon as I read the summary of this book, I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. Again, I like emotionally complex explorations, stories where characters are coming to find themselves. This sounds like it's going to be a really promising. Then we have Indian Burial Ground by Nick Medina. Medina is from the Tanika Biloxi tribe in Louisiana. A man lunges in front of a car. An elderly woman silently drowns herself. Corpse sits up in a coffin and speaks. On this reservation, not all is what it seems. So Nick Medina came onto my radar, I want to say 2 or 3 years back. His debut novel, Sisters of a Lost Nation, was a book that I predicted for Book of the Month. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, they did not select it, but I heard decent rumblings about it. This is his sophomore release, and it sounds really interesting. I've been meaning to check out his writing for quite a while, since his first release came out, and so I'm really excited to try him out this month. And finally, I have Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. She's Inuit from Nunavut, Canada. A girl grows up in Nunavut in the 1970s. She knows joy and friendship and a parent's love. She also knows boredom, listlessness, and bullying. She knows the tedium of the everyday world and the raw, immoral power of the ice and sky, the seductive energy of the animal world. She knows the ravages of alcohol and violence at the hands of those that she should be able to trust. She sees the spirit that surrounds her and the immense power that dwarfs us all. When she becomes pregnant, she must navigate all of this. So this book came across my radar a couple years ago, and it was one of those types of books where I was immediately captivated by the cover. The cover is pretty simplistic. There's just like a face right in the middle of it in the titling, but I really love the starkness of it. And then I read the description. I'm like, oh man, I gotta get to this. This sounds really good. So I'm really pleased to have it on my TBR for the month of November. This is a book I'm really looking forward to. So those are all of my concrete selections for my TBR, everything that is for readathons and not for readathons. And I just wanted to mention one other thing. So today I put up a poll for the Backlist Book Club. There are a handful of books that I picked out and a handful of books that Jamie over at Jamie Kate picked out. So if you're interested in reading a book along with us, please head over to that poll and click which book you want to read. That poll will be open for a week. So on the 7th of November, I will be shutting that down and announcing what won and what will be the selection. And from there, you will have the rest of November and then all the way through December to read it. And towards the end of the month in December, Jamie and I will sit down to host a book club discussion. So if you like that kind of thing, please feel free to join us. Join in on the discussion. I'm going to be putting up some posts throughout November and December about the book as well, so feel free to participate there. I'm not sure obviously what book we'll be reading for that yet because the voting will close on November the 7th, but that'll be added into my TBR for November as well. So that is the end of all the books I wanted to talk about today. I know as per usual, I have way more picked out than I'm probably going to be able to read in the month, but that's okay. That gives me some freedom to kind of mood read throughout the month. I like that because then I'm not stuck with like a handful of specific books. I kind of can pop around and read the things that I'm feeling in a moment. I'm stoked for this TBR here in November. There are so many books that look to be fantastic reads. I just know that this is going to be one of the better reading months that I have in 2024. So that's the end of all of the books that I wanted to talk about. I hope that you found this video interesting. If you did, hit the thumbs up, comment down below, and let me know what you think of my selections. Let me know too if you've read any of these books. Tell me if you liked them, if you didn't like them. Just keep it spoiler free, please. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button down below as well as the notification bell so that you never miss a video, and that way we can see each other again soon. Thanks so much for joining. Bye.